Hello, I'm Brett Robin Wood. Welcome to the channel. This channel is all about using music and conversation to shed light on this wonderful human adventure that we're all on. And I'm very delighted to have a guest with me today, Miriam Joy, who's co-founder of Open Circle, who are an organisation doing very grounded and I think very groundbreaking work in helping organisations and people and teams understand themselves better and through that understanding, make progress on their adventure. So, Miriam, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you going?
Brett, it's good to see you. So good to be here. It really is. I feel like even though we're across the world from each other, that we're in your living room. And the thing I'm most excited about is I've been, as you know, a long fan of your song. So I get to hear a song that I've heard many times and get to listen to it again.
Oh, thanks, Miriam. You might find a few updated lyrics too. There's been a couple of verses added in recent years.
Exciting.
Yeah, well, that's probably a good segue into the song. For those of you new to the channel, I play a song, and that kicks off the delving into different themes. So I'll play the song, and Miriam's going to have a listen along. Then afterwards, Miriam and I'll have a chat. So here we go. It's called, I forgot to say, people out there, this video has coarse language. You have been warned. It's called Shut the Fuck Up and Listen. When you find yourself in an argy-bargy tussle, you may be tempted to use some muscle. When you think that you're right and they're wrong, try to remember this song. When you want to win the debate, when you want to set them straight, it might be time to rethink your position. Shut the fuck up and listen. When you're selling someone something and they're finding it hard to believe it, you know the way to go, but they're telling you they just don't see it. You're pretending to listen, but in your mind you've gone into a huddle. You're nodding away as if to say I'm with you as you prepare your rebuttal. Well, you just want to win the deal or close the sale with a nifty spiel. It might be time to rethink your position. Shut the fuck up and listen. When someone shows some emotion and it sets your mouth in motion, you mean well with your placating words, but it could be this needs to be heard. When you just want everyone to be friends so things can feel normal again, and kick the can of truth into the distance. Shut the fuck up and listen. Why do you tread on their words? Can you just let them be heard? Don't pretend, don't be faking. Have a go at really listening. We all got a little control freak. Gotta let go, take a peek. How does the world look in their shoes? You gotta let go what you think is true. That voice in your head that's dissing doesn't want to look outside your position. Have a go, make it a mission. Shut the up. When someone will not be indoctrinated, do you feel the need to be vindicated? When someone refuses to comply, do you feel the urge to crucify? You don't have to capitulate, but can you fight without hate? Does their defiance have to equal treason? Can you shut the fuck up and listen? Do you love or do you fear the free exchange of ideas? And do you offer nightmare or vision? Can you shut the fuck up and listen? There it is.
How does it feel to play it? What
Oh,
memories come up for you?
great question. Thank you. It feels good to play it. It's kind of therapeutic. I did. It's funny because just like I failed completely to listen well this very morning with my daughter, who was not in a great kind of headspace and didn't want to go to school, and I'm like, no, that just doesn't suit my agenda at all. Um, and it's quite, yeah, it's sort of, it's, I don't know about you, but I've been working for a long time on myself, on my skills, of like being a good person in the world, and listening is a pretty basic one. So and it just never fails to amaze me how just when I think I've got it handled, I come back to square one. Am I
Wow.
alone in that?
Oh, Brett. I thought you were singing it to me.
All right. Oh God.
No, but I mean, that song is obviously rich in history for
Mm,
us. So it was interesting listening to it because for me, there was the current, and
mm,
I've based our current organization with a foundation of listening in the wider sense of
yeah.
the word. And so I was
Mm,
listening through that lens. I was remembering sitting by the fire. I think it was by a fire.
yeah.
It was like that outdoor crappy fire outside my grandma's house in the Blue Mountains when
Mm,
we we're having our company conference, and you played it, and it was so delightful. It
mm,
was kind of like a bit of a cathartic thing for the people who were listening to it, because in our work, so much of it was creating space in organizations, in communities, to just be able to take in other points of view and to be able to like say,
mm.
excuse my language, just shut the fuck up and listen. It was so direct. It was like something you would never be allowed to say.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So, it was kind of like,
Yeah.
I really remember that catharsis and everyone going, yeah.
See that?
And then,
Go on. Go on.
no, and then I was, of course, the second after you go, yeah, yeah, the camera comes pointing back to yourself.
Yeah, right. You just reminded me of actually probably it would have been maybe the first time I played it outside of a group of people, you might call it a safe group of people who you know well. And, I played it in a business setting, maybe a few years after that time. And so folks out there, if you don't know, Miriam and I, both spend part of our time in working with different organizations in different contexts. We find ourselves with people with a lot of different industries and sectors. And so anyway, I was at a leadership, facilitating a leadership retreat, and it was one where we did have some fairly edgy conversation, I suppose, about their own organization, and things were getting heated, and no one was listening to each other at all. And that was fine, you just let a bit of argy-bargy play out for a while. But I just felt this hunch. I had my guitar there, so I just picked up the guitar and I just started playing just the chords while they kept arguing. And over a period of, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes or something, gradually they noticed that this guy's got his guitar out and they're going, "What are you doing?" And that I played this song, "Shut the fuck up and listen." And they were like, their jaws were dropping. They'd never heard anything like it. So yeah, there's something about naming it, isn't it? And
Well, in that moment, I think like, I felt like I was in that moment. There's something in that moment. And I remember in our work together, one of the brilliant things was that in those moments when the stakes are high and there's a high level of care, which if people are argy-barging that much, there must be some high stakes there for them in some way. And um, and the turnaround moment, I mean, I'm not sure they laughed, but the turnaround moment of doing something that's kind of outrageous in that context. I'm not going to try and solve this. I'm
yeah,
not going to
right.
try and fix it. I'm not going to be the good facilitator. I'm actually just going to play what's underneath, like what's going on here.
Yeah,
there's something like I was trying to listen to of course I want to hear it again. The whole time you were saying, can you send me, I know, serious, can you send me that? Because I can think of several people I might want to send it to. but there's something in it of also breaking the ice and the reality of what's going on in those difficult moments. And, while it is kind of like about listening, it's also about having the space to actually be in your story and the other person to be in theirs. And, I really heard that this time, because there's something when you're reacting to someone and you're not listening to them, where you think you're in your story, but you're actually kind of like just in your opinions. You're not in the fullness of the story. Do you know what I mean? You're just coming back and you're hitting up against, it's like bang, bang, it's hitting against that kind of thing. And so not only is it you're not listening to the other person, but in some ways I think you're not listening to yourself, and you're not actually representing the fullness of your story and the fullness of who you are. So there's kind of like both. I heard both of those capacities in that moment. And also, of course, when you turn it internally to, when you're in an emotional state, you've received information, you get in that emotional state, and you can't listen to the fullness of your internal story either. The fullness being with that kind of fullness of what's going on. And, yeah. So that's kind of like what hit.
Thanks. I think I have had a bit of an aha moment there. I wonder if, when you said we're not really in our story, we're in our opinions, and I love that distinction. I wonder if, I'll just speak for myself, when I'm stuck in my opinion and wanting to set people straight, I wonder if in a way I've always thought of, well, I avoid deeply hearing someone else by digging my heels into my opinion, but that's made me think it's also an escape hatch from actually listening to myself. And I again, because this is fresh from this morning, I feel like what I was denying, not only in the other person but in myself, was actually the vulnerability of that moment. Like I just did not want to feel any of that sense of being out of my depth and the yuckiness of that. It's so much easier to keep it on a narrow bandwidth of
Yeah. And I also, for me, and I think in people I've observed, it's more, it's a nervous system thing, I think, as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's so in that nervous system, in me at least, it cuts something off. And the song is interesting because it has for me a dual thing. So because we're talking about discussion with our daughters. Something similar happened to me the other night with my daughter, and I know that if I'm triggered by something, and my nervous system is responding, and for whatever reason I'm not even recognizing that in that moment, there's a part of me that wants to have a release. Do you know what I mean? Like, my nervous system wants to have a release. And what's so brilliant about the song and your story about when you did it was, I think that the song itself, the fact that you use fuck, shut the fuck up and listen, is also in and of itself a release of something. You know what I mean? Like, it serves as that. It serves as that kind of like, because it is an explosive feeling when you're in your nervous. It's like, and so it serves as purpose. So in that moment, you're reflecting back both the kind of like the tension, the expression of that, plus it's kind of like, okay, what do we really need here? And I think that's, for me, the brilliance of that song. That's why I love it so much, because it has a kind of dual, it has a dual purpose. It's not like judging. It's not saying, but it has that dual purpose of actually it does release something. And I think, when I think back to when you first played it, the catharsis in that moment was actual, and it was our annual conference after a year of working in some very, different, tough situations with people. It's the catharsis is actually releasing the tension that we were holding, of like the tension of other people, not just like judging, you're all not listening to each other, but in those moments there's tension, and that sometimes there's nowhere for it to go when it's banging up against each other. It's kind of like it's caught. And so there's something brilliant in that moment where it releases, that actually allows that listening, that allows that kind of like the fullness of and I often, so when I came back to that conversation, coming back to the conversation with my daughter, I judged myself for that. Obviously, parents, we're always judging ourselves, of like, that was inappropriate, you were triggered, you've got to work out how to not be triggered, how to not be emotional in the. But then another part of me is like, it wasn't just that moment. There was a buildup that I hadn't expressed, or like hadn't quite realized. And so in us both having that buildup and coming back and then having the conversation the next day, it was a different conversation than if I had controlled myself as well. And like, if I had done, oh, I'm triggered, I should do my work,
for sure.
So I don't want to totally say that it's wrong in that context. Like, obviously it's wrong if it gets violent, and it often doesn't go anywhere. But you also recognized in that client situation that you said something along the words of, oh yeah, they were argy-bargy. I needed to leave them argy-bargy a little bit, your technical term. And I do think that's part of it. Do you know what I mean? If it's been there for a while and it hasn't been released, sometimes that argy-barginess, that kind of that thing, and then there's a time it's like, no, now it's time. Now let it out. Let's move on. Let's actually now do that.
Wow. I'm thinking Shakespeare just came to mind, and this is something that you and I also have a shared history with. There's an appreciation for Shakespeare and some fairly, in-depth delving into it. The Shakespearean image of the storm, it's a big part of Shakespeare's plays. I think of, is it, well, there's The Tempest, the obvious one, and there are others that don't come to mind, but the big, like, we see human beings with all their folly and beauty and, just the different agendas, and they're all just trying to, work their way through, and mess gets created, and often there's a really huge storm that comes in, and then after the storm there's some kind of equilibrium or resolution, because the storm like literally cracks branches and gets dead wood literally blown away, and big wind comes and goes through the wind. It just gets knocked about, and then a kind of peace follows, and makes me think about what is it to release ourselves of the burden of being the perfect listener, but instead asking, when the storm happens, how do I get through that without broken branches getting like broken? Maybe they can be cleared away without something getting busted beyond repair, because there is that, I think there is always that threat. I think I shut down my own voice for a long time in my life because I feared the very real possibility of the violence that might come out if I opened my mouth. So it's such a fine thing, isn't it? How do we find our way through this, knowing the potential for violence, but also knowing the awful cost of just sweeping everything under the rug and pretending it's not there.
Yeah, as you're talking, what's coming up for me is I think when in my own life, it's when I haven't, so the temptation, particularly in contexts where it's not acceptable to storm like that, is to, if it comes out, is to kind of like look at it as a moment of being out of control and not good. And for me, it's been like to travel beyond that judgment, to actually listen to the storm really closely. Like that, listen to it within myself. Why did that trigger happen? Okay, where does it come from? What a part of that is old, kind of showing its face? What part of that is current? And what part of that in the other person what is do I need to listen to that hasn't been listened to? Because often in a storm, things get said, and not to say then to go, not. I mean, obviously, people say things in storms that aren't factual or correct. They exaggerate. That's just what happens. So not to like listen to the literal meaning of it, but for me, being able to like listen to the feeling underneath, and kind of listen to the feeling underneath for myself and for the other person, and to be able to really take that in. For me, that's been one of the hardest things, because that's the nuance for me. It's like not to then go back and say, I'm sorry, that was out of control. This is what I meant to say. This is what it should be. But rather, hey, yes, if an apology is needed, but hey, yeah, we really lost it last night. What's, where do we go? Like, where do we go? Like, you really don't want to do that, or what was underneath it, and I think what it is that actually, for me, in those moments, yes, I'm not listening. Yes, we're both in our opinions, but actually there is another part of me that is listening. It's feeling in that moment of like, there's some deep pain there that I don't want to feel, or some deep, dissatisfaction, or whatever it is. And so coming back and being able to let myself feel that, rather than the sting of the words, or the literal thing of the words. You said that, sometimes like, you said that, particularly in family fights. But to like listen to what actually might have been driving that in myself and in the other person. And I think that's, it's just like going back to that corporate situation and going, wow, you guys really care. There's something in this that's high stakes for you, and there's a deep level of care there. Like, that's often when I go into the organizational environment or leadership environment, just to remember that. Like, in so many ways, for me, that's better than, apathy.
Hell yeah, absolutely. It's reminds me of that word, what's underneath, and the felt sense. It's so primary, and like we grow up, our little identities, before there's any rational mind, there's felt sense, isn't there? And it comes with us, and strangely, a lot of people become very disconnected from it, and I was one of them, and I'm still on a journey learning to include the felt sense in in the picture. And in organizations, one of the most simplest things that I've been experimenting with that has been, that I get feedback, is a revelation for people. I didn't know it at the time of that retreat I was talking about, but since then I've been in similar situations, and there's been argy-bargy, and if we've contracted to this, if I have the permission, I'll say, hey, this is one of these moments where we could investigate and understand, what's in operation here, so that we can just get to know ourselves better. So, are you okay to do that? And they go, yeah. I'll go, just grab a pen and just disconnect from the group, and just notice what's happening in your body right now. How would you? Where's the energy, and what's the felt sense, and just give them a bit of space for that. Just jot down a couple of words, and it's such a simple thing to do. And for many people, they come out of that and kind of go, "Oh my God," fury, or sadness, because we've been here so many times before. And suddenly the conversations are this whole other level that was always there. And somehow, like it was miles away, but it was just a thin veil. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. There was a couple of things that you said there. Permission. That moment of either you had been granted permission, or that you needed, or that you needed to gain permission in order to look at what was in operation in an environment, and that could be with your daughter too. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, I'm not talking just about professional senses, but in any sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I can feel even the energy of this moment of like, there's a sense of like, well, and this is a far different thing of listening to someone's words. That's what we're delving into now. It's like listening to the fullness of actually what's here in this moment. Like, I feel sadness in this moment as you were speaking to that. I felt, oh, there's sadness here, and there's which I wouldn't have expected. Do you know what I mean? And that the kind of like the capacity, the idea of the capacity to listen of what's in operation, in your environment, and what it takes to do that. I mean, it's like, I was thinking about a client gig that's coming up, and it's so hard. It will be so hard to get the permission, not on a superficial sense, on a deeper sense, to get the permission, because those in different environments, what I experience for safety, it's like, I'm not, you don't have permission to go there, because if I go there in this environment, it's not safe for me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, or in my internal environment with some people, no, I actually can't go there now, because if I go there, this will happen. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, for sure.
and so that I guess as I'm thinking about the words now, shut the fuck up and listen, and the wording of the song that goes from, this idea of a fight with someone else to like, actually that capacity, where we started, that capacity in yourself of opening up to different parts of yourself and feeling safe enough to do that in different environments.
Yeah.
And also how to keep yourself safe. Not because someone else creates the safety.
Yeah, wow.
But because you can create that safety yourself.
Holding space. Yeah, in my felt sense, now I feel this tightness, and and I guess that's partly the vulnerability of opening conversation and putting it out onto YouTube, and there's all the subterranean anxiety around that, and and the desire to be smart, and I'm noticing a kind of tug to want to tie this up in a neat little bow for people, so that they get the takeaway. And so I'm kind of curious about what it's like to just stay with a felt sense instead. So, and the word adventure comes to mind. I think this is, and maybe this is good news in here, that it's quite an adventure, I think, looking at conversation and relationship as more than a series of techniques that you might learn to, be more assertive, or this or that, or be a better listener. And yes, kind of look into this territory of, well, who am I being, and what's what's alive in me when this is all happening, and just discovering what space opens up when this investigation is undertaken, and what vulnerability as well. It's quite an adventure, and I'm finding a lot of what's the word? It's a resourcing way of looking at it, to think of this as an adventure. So yeah, I don't know. What do you say to that?
Well, it's so much a basis of my exploration. You know, we take people into the wilderness for a particular reason. Like, you know, I look at this as life, like walking through life as a wilderness. And in the wilderness, you can predict some things, like the cycle of a day. And in fact, but you can't predict what it's exactly going to be like, but that cycle is going to happen. But you can't, you can't predict what you might need at any given moment. You can prepare by creating a kind of like putting things in your backpack, kind of thinking about what it is and seeing the map and seeing the territory. But the map and the territory are never the same as what it is to walk through it. And, for me, it's such a good analogy of what it is to have the deeper sense of listening as your orientation in life. Because I equate listening, in the sense that we're talking about it, as aliveness, like being alive, like another word you could put, so being alive to the different complexity of meaning, of different kind of things that are going on. I mean, we both know, as when you're in a group and you really stop and listen to a group, it's very complex, and there are a lot of things going on. Like on all levels, there's a lot going on. Do you know what I mean? And you can't possibly be in the wilderness or in those environments and think of it as a problem to be solved. Do you know what I mean? Like, that would be ridiculous. Whenever you go out into the wilderness, just like, for me at least, I get this kind of sense of like, oh, I'm so small. Oh, I don't have any control. Like, we have this like false illusion through our lights and through our houses that, we've got control over the day. Like, it's so not true. And you can't hide from that when you're in the wilderness. You don't have control over your environment. Do you know what I mean? That's a major thing. And so being able to kind of like take your environment and other people in that way, opens up something else. And then the resource like of adventure, but also the resource of like, well, what is steady? If I can't control other people and I can't control my environment more than I can, do you know what I mean? What is steady? Well, I can have a steadiness in myself by knowing myself more fully and knowing what my responses are. And I can have a steadiness in being in the cycle of a day, like, and knowing that cycle and observing it. Do you know what I mean? For me, it's so simple. Like, it sounds ridiculous. If I was like, when I say it to people, it sounds absolutely ridiculous. What would it be to live your life with an orientation of listening? Do you know what I mean? Like, it sounds kind of like, what do you mean? Like, that's just, but to take that to its furthest place. And to then find out how that orientation changes for me, how I can move through the world without trying to like control what's going to happen in the future. And I think one of the biggest things in my life, just to be a little bit, to get into my own vulnerability, is, from our experiences together at B, which was a company that Brett and I worked in together. And I was one of the co-founders, and Brett and I actually, prior to co-founding it, like kind of like created the foundation in so many ways for what that was becoming. We did all that work beforehand. And, as it came into being and as I kind of like started to construct what I wanted to get out of it, and towards the end, when I started to go, place that, like really prioritize that in a way, it actually blinded me to other things that were as important. But because I diminished it before, like, it's like, it's like you saying you put things under the rug. I diminished my own needs in a lot of ways, not just at work, but in all aspects of my life. When I tried to prioritize, it was almost false, and it actually blinded me to so many things that were important to me that could have, I think, really served me, like capacities I had. And I remember getting to the end of it, and I was in the States by that stage. And one of the things that was important was having a house, because it would make me feel secure. Do you know what I mean? If I have a house, I will feel secure. And I'll never forget this moment of like getting into the house, and I was alone and kind of like looking around and then sliding on the wall and just like crying and crying and crying, because I realized it didn't make me feel secure at all. In fact, it just brought up more problems. And in fact, this thing that I kind of like hung my hat on as an outcome, like if I get this outcome, then, everything else will fall into line, was so false and small-minded, in the bigger scheme of my life. I'm not saying that's true for other people, but in my life, that was being small-minded. That was not my path.
Yeah.
And it really led me to, in that moment, when I listened to that, it really led me to see all the other things I constructed in my life that were really blocking me from truly being able to listen in a more wide sense to what was going on in myself, in the world. Do you know what I mean? Like things I thought would protect me felt like they were actually, attacking is a strong word, not attacking me, but were so like false, I guess is the better word.
Wow.
And that led me to a very different orientation in life, and like what has for the last 10 years felt very in many ways unsafe, and that is not validated by a lot of social cultural norms. But yet I can tell you now that I have something which is so solid in me, like so clear and so aligned. And I have this sense of like, throw anything at me. I might fall down. I probably will, because I'm not that strong. But that, that clarity in me and that kind of sense I have inside myself is like, but I know what it means I know what it is to get up and to like, what surprised me over the last couple of years is all these things came to hit at me, like thing after external obstacle after external obstacle. Like I was, in moments going, why? And someone put a hex on me. Why is this going on? And in the end, there was such a gift, because every time I checked in with myself, the solidity in myself, inside myself, had not diminished at all. And I was like, I was criticizing myself because of the choices I made, because they seemed to be not secure choices and people who, like my family, might say, what are you doing? But when I checked in with myself, I realized I had this enormous gift, enormous, that was going to stay with me for the rest of my life. And I knew it. And I knew that it wouldn't be diminished. And I knew that all the work I'd done and all the lack of safety and kind of fear I had felt, that for me, it was worth it, because I could carry this with me. And that's, for me, like the gift I now have in, which is not easy, but walking in the wilderness in my life. Not, yes, I go out into the wilderness, but in my life, walking into the wilderness, that allows that kind of listening in situations to myself and to others and to the environment and to the world and to what's going on in the world, which is sometimes really disturbing. and to be allowed to come in and come back to that and to ask me, well, what's not like, what do I want to build in the future, as much as, well, what does that mean for me right now? How do I need to be and do from this place in response to that?
Oh, thank you. What an adventure. I think of you sliding down the wall and how, I get a sense of how awful that was, and yet at the same time how transformative it was. It's extraordinary. Yeah. I feel like maybe we're coming toward a natural end. What do you think? Is there more things in you bubbling around to share or discuss? Or
What occurs to me, and I don't know if this is possible, but given the kind of conversation and where we've taken it, I think it'd be really meaningful to hear the song again. There's something in me that feels like, given the conversation that we've had, that I'll listen to it differently.
Thank you. What a great suggestion. When you find yourself in an argy-bargy tussle and you're tempted to use some muscle, when you're sure that you're right and they're wrong, try to remember this song. You want to win the debate, you want to set them straight. It might be time to rethink your position. Shut the fuck up and listen. When you're selling someone something and they're finding it hard to believe it, you know the way to go, but they're telling you they just don't see it. You're pretending to listen, but in your mind you've gone into a huddle, nodding away as if to say I'm with you as you prepare your rebuttal. You want to win the deal, close the sale with a nifty spiel. It might be time to rethink your position. Shut the fuck up and listen. When someone shows some emotion and it sets your mouth in motion, you mean well with your placating words, but it could be this needs to be heard. When you just want everyone to be friends so things can feel normal again, kick the can of truth up into the distance. Shut the fuck up and listen. What do you tread on their words? Can you just let them be heard? Don't pretend, don't be faking. Have a go at really listening. We all got a little control freak. Gotta let go, take a peek. How does the world look in their shoes? You gotta let go what you think is true. That voice in your head that's dissing doesn't want to look outside your position. Have a go, make it a mission. Shut the up. When someone will not be indoctrinated, do you feel the need to be vindicated? When someone refuses to comply, do you feel the urge to crucify? Well, you don't have to capitulate. Can you fight without hate? Does their defiance have to equal treason? Can you shut the fuck up and listen? Do you love or do you fear the free exchange of ideas? Do you offer nightmare or vision? Can you shut the fuck up and listen? Miriam, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Viewers, thank you for your time. Thanks for tuning into the channel. Yeah, till next time, happy listening.